There is a land in the heart of Ireland where the trees grow old and close together, where the wind moves through the branches in a voice that is almost speech, and where the dark comes early and stays long. It is the kingdom of Ossory, a place of green hills and deep valleys, of rivers that run cold over grey stones, and of silences that press against a man like a hand laid flat upon his chest. The people of other kingdoms knew of Ossory. They spoke of it carefully, the way you speak of a wound that has not yet healed. Travelers who passed through its borderlands pulled their cloaks tighter as evening fell, not because of any cold in the air, but because of something older. Something that had been placed upon that land long ago and had never been lifted. At night, in the hills above the valleys, there were howls. This was not strange in itself. Ireland had wolves as any country does. But the men who heard these howls, men who had heard wolves all their lives, would sometimes go quiet and look at one another with eyes that said more than their mouths would. Because these howls were not quite right. There was something in them that the wolves of other lands did not carry. Something underneath the sound, like a word that cannot find its shape. No one spoke of this openly. But the knowledge lived in the kingdom like water lives beneath the ground, present everywhere, invisible and cold. This is the story of that land and of that curse, and of the night a priest sat alone in a forest and heard a wolf speak to him in the voice of a man. The people of Ossory carried within them a tradition, ancient and heavy as a millstone. They said that a curse had been laid upon their kingdom by a holy man, a saint of God, in the days before the memory of any living person could reach. The name of the saint is not given to us with certainty in the account that has come down through time. What is recorded is the fact of the curse itself, its nature and its law. And the law was this: at all times 2 people of Ossory would be taken, 1 man and 1 woman. They would be stripped of the human lives they had known, stripped of their homes and their hearths and the faces of those they loved, and they would be driven out into the wilderness. They would walk on 4 legs. They would know hunger as the beast knows it. They would live among the trees and the stones and the dark. But they would not be beasts entirely. And this is what made the curse so terrible. The transformation was real. The wolf's body was real, the gray fur, the long jaw, the yellow eyes that caught the firelight and threw it back. But inside the wolf, the human soul remained. The man or woman who had been taken remembered who they were. They remembered their name, their prayers, their grief. They could think in the language of men. They could speak when circumstances compelled them. But they lived the life of wolves, in the cold and the wet, far from the warmth of human company. The term of their exile was 7 years. After 7 years, if God permitted, they might return to their human form, and 2 others would be taken in their place to carry the curse forward. So it had been, the tradition said, from that first punishment given by the saint. So it continued. 2 of Ossory's people were always in the wilderness, always walking in wolf's flesh, always waiting for the years to pass. Why had the saint cursed them? The accounts do not give a single clear answer. What they preserve is the shape of the punishment, divine, enduring, passed from generation to generation. It was not a curse born of cruelty but of judgment. Something had been done. Something had offended God or his servant. And the land bore the consequence. This is what was known. This is what was whispered. And most people who whispered it never had cause to know whether it was true. One priest did. His name is not preserved. He was a priest traveling through Meath, which lies to the north of Ossory, in the time when Gerald of Wales gathered his accounts of Ireland. He was making his way through the forest by night, a thing no man with good sense would choose to do, but necessity is not always kind about its timing. He had made a small fire. He sat beside it, and he was doing what a traveling priest does when he stops alone in the dark of a strange wood. He prayed. He kept his fire burning. He waited for the light. Then from the darkness beyond the tree line, something came. It came slowly. It did not rush or spring. It moved with a kind of deliberate care, the way a creature moves when it does not wish to cause fear. And the priest saw it for what it was, a wolf, large, gray and real. It stopped at the edge of the firelight and stood there, and its eyes caught the flame and held it. The priest did not move. Then the wolf spoke. The account is plain on this point. The wolf spoke. It addressed the priest in a human voice, in human words. It asked the priest not to be afraid. It told him that it was not his enemy. And what it said next was stranger still. The wolf told the priest that it was a man, or had been a man, that it came from the kingdom of Ossory, that it and a companion, a woman, had been taken by the ancient curse and were now living out their years in the form of wolves. It spoke of the curse without bitterness, only with a kind of grave heaviness, as one who has long since stopped fighting what cannot be fought and has learned only to endure it. The priest listened. What else could he do? He was a man of the church, trained in the knowledge of God and the mysteries of creation. He had read of strange things. He believed in them. But belief written on a page is one thing, and a wolf speaking quietly across a fire in the deep Irish night is another. His hands, we may imagine, were not entirely still. The wolf was patient. It spoke at length. It explained the law of the curse, the 7 years, the two people, the return to human form when the time was done. It was not asking for rescue. It was not making demands. It was asking for something else. Something smaller and in its smallness more piercing. The wolf asked the priest to come with him. The priest followed the wolf. He followed it through the dark trees, through the cold, away from his fire and the safety it represented. Whether this was courage or obedience to God's promptings, Gerald of Wales does not say. Perhaps it was both. A man of faith, when confronted with the impossible, does not always have the luxury of standing still. The wolf led him to a place not far into the forest. And there, beneath the trees, lay another wolf. A she-wolf, stretched on the ground, breathing in the labored, shallow way of the very sick. The male wolf approached her gently, and the priest could see from the way he moved near her that this was the companion he had spoken of. The woman from Ossory in her wolf's body, lying in the cold earth of the wilderness, old and ill and near her end. The wolf turned to the priest and asked him to perform the last rites. This was the weight of it. This was why the wolf had come out of the darkness to a stranger's fire. Not for itself. For her. Because she was dying and she was a human soul, and she should not die without the comfort of the sacraments. She should not go to God unhoused, without the prayers of the church, without the oil and the words that a dying Christian deserved. The priest stood at the edge of this. He was at the boundary of everything his learning could tell him. Before him was a wolf. In the teaching of the church, animals did not have souls in the way that humans did. They could not receive the sacraments. The rite of last unction was not made for them. But what if this was not simply a wolf? As if to answer the question before it could grow into hesitation, the she-wolf did something. With great difficulty, in the manner of one performing an act that costs everything, she pulled back the wolf's skin from her head. She folded it back, or seemed to fold it, with what movement she had left. And beneath it, beneath the gray fur and the animal jaw, was the face of an old woman. A human face. Aged, worn, gentle in the way of those who have suffered long and quietly. A woman's face, looking up at the priest from the body of a dying wolf in the forests of Ireland. She was real. She was there. She was human. The priest knelt. What the priest did in that moment tells us something of the man. He did not flee. He did not refuse. He performed the rites. He administered to the dying woman the last offices of the church, as best as the strange circumstances allowed. He prayed over her. He gave her what a Christian soul in extremis was owed. But afterward, and this is where the story becomes something more than a strange tale of the woods, the question would not leave him. Gerald of Wales, who recorded this account in his Topographia Hibernica, understood that what the priest had encountered was not simply a wonder or a curiosity. It was a problem. A genuine and serious theological problem. One that pressed against the edges of what the church had determined about the nature of the human soul, the nature of the beast, and the distinction between them. The question was this: what are they? If the wolf retained a human soul, if inside the wolf's body a man or a woman still prayed, still knew God, still suffered as a human suffers, then in what sense was the wolf truly an animal? The church taught that the soul was what made a human being. The soul was the seat of reason, of conscience, of moral life. If the soul remained, was the wolf form only a kind of clothing? A prison of flesh imposed by divine punishment? Gerald presents this with the seriousness it deserves. He notes that the wolf himself, the man from Ossory, spoke of these things as a man speaks. He reasoned. He pleaded on behalf of his companion. He understood the sacraments and their necessity. He knew God. These were not the acts of a beast. These were the acts of a man who happened to be wearing a body that was not his own. And yet the church was careful here. The transformation had been real. This was not enchantment in the sense of mere illusion. The wolf body was not a disguise painted over a visible human form. It was genuine. The soul dwelt within it. But the authority of divine punishment was real also. God, through his saint, had ordained this. What God had placed upon them, no one was in a position to casually overturn or ignore. Gerald of Wales, writing with the care of a man who knows he is touching something delicate, concludes that the priest did right. That where there is a human soul, there is a human person, and a human person who is dying is owed the mercy of the church. The wolf's body did not erase the woman. The woman remained. and the church's duty followed her into the wilderness. This is the center of it all, and it is not a small thing. It is, in its way, one of the most profound questions the story asks. What makes a person a person? What does the flesh conceal? When we look at the shape of a creature and name it beast, are we certain of what we have named? The priest returned from the forest. The she-wolf, who had been a woman of Ossory, died in the wilderness as the dawn came. Whether she passed in peace, having received the last rites, the account does not tell us. But she had been seen. She had been attended to. She had not died entirely alone. The male wolf, the man of Ossory, remained. He had 7 years to serve, or some portion of them remaining, and he would serve them as the curse demanded. He would return to the wilderness, to the grey world of the wolf, carrying his human soul quietly within him until his time was done. The account tells us that this was brought before church authorities for consideration. The bishop who was consulted, again Gerald does not give us a name, took the matter seriously. This is notable. The question of the souls of the wolf people of Ossory was treated not as madness or as fiction but as a genuine pastoral concern. What did the church owe to those who were human in soul but animal in body through the punishment of God? The answer arrived at, with some care, was that the humanity of the soul could not be ignored. The sacraments had been rightly administered. And the curse itself? It continued. The tradition, as Gerald understood it, was ongoing. 2 people of Ossory were always in the wilderness. 2 were always counting the years. The curse had not lifted. There was no indication that it would lift. It had been given by a saint in the name of God, and it ran its course as it had always done, generation after generation, sending 2 souls out of their human lives and into the cold and the dark, to walk on 4 legs through the forests of Ireland until their time returned. The kingdom of Ossory went on. The hills were still green. The rivers still ran cold. And somewhere, always, in the wilderness that pressed close around the edges of settled life, there were wolves that were not entirely wolves. What Gerald of Wales wrote down in his Topographia Hibernica, around the year 1188, was not a story he invented. He gathered it as he gathered all his accounts of Ireland, from those who were present, from those who had heard, from the living memory of a land he was trying to understand and record for those who came after him. He did not laugh at it. He did not dismiss it. He weighed it with the same serious attention he gave to the rivers and the mountains and the customs of the Irish people. He asked the questions it demanded to be asked. He did not always answer them because some questions do not resolve. They sit. They remain. They wait like the wolves in the dark beyond the fire. The forests of Ossory are quieter now than they were. The kingdom has become a county, and the county has roads and towns and all the noise of living that pushes back the dark. The wolf as a living creature has been gone from Ireland for centuries. But there is something that does not leave a land easily. Not when it has been there long enough. Not when it was placed there by something older than forgetting. The wind still moves through the old trees in that part of Ireland in a voice that is almost speech. And if you are a certain kind of person, if you sit still long enough beside a dying fire in the dark, you might hear, far away in the hills, something that makes you pull your coat a little tighter. Not because of the cold, but because of what it sounds like. Almost. Thank you for watching. If you value deep, historical storytelling, please consider liking the video, subscribing and turning on notifications. More journeys into folklore and history await.